the Dallas Fort Worth area. She lives in Dallas, originally from Hobbs, New Mexico. Has like, yeah, has a background, an interesting background in your bio. Like you did your undergraduate degree, but then were a corporate aviation photographer for a few years. And then more recently finished your graduate degree at Texas Women's University. Kalee shows at Erin Cluey Gallery in Dallas. Most recently, you may have seen her work up in Houston. She did an exhibition that was a partnership with Photo Fest and Houston Center for Photography. It was like Texas photography, working in alternative,
conceptual. I think it was like Texas photographers conceptual photography.
Yeah.
I think or something.
Yeah, conceptual. Yeah. And it's really great to have her work here. I don't know if this is your first time to Galveston.
It is.
It is. So we're bringing people to Galveston just for you. So tell us a little bit about this body of work.
Sure.
Because I know it's like a lot going on. Yeah.
Well, first off, let me thank Dennis for inviting me, and then for everyone who like hung the show and unpacked my work and all that stuff. It's kind of a thankless job at times. I understand that. So I really appreciate it. So who in here, when you were a kid, had you would go to like Olden Mills or like Kmart, and then you would sit in front of like a photograph of like a meadow or something for Easter. And you'd sit, and then you'd get your photograph taken. And so a lot of us, I would say like 90% of us, our first experience with photography is essentially portrait photography and these photographic backdrops. Well, that is what I'm photographing. So I'm photographing photographic backdrops, and I'm glad you laughed because I think of it as like I like to attempt to put humor in my work whenever I can, and I think that idea is kind of like a funny idea. The thing that I do find so interesting about it, and this was kind of happened whenever I wandered into a used photography store one day, and I saw all these backdrops rolled up, and I was like, oh my god, like I just was like taken back to like all my like portrait sessions at Kmart, you know? And like I unrolled them, and it was like this like serious sense of nostalgia that I was like, oh my god, like these are like amazing objects, you know, like how often do I really come into contact with these anymore? I don't, even as a photographer. I was like, I just love this as an object. I like need to own this. So I bought a few of them, and I've started collecting them. And my first instinct was to just put them in the space. So similar to like probably what Tim's work kind of looked like, was just like these objects. And then I started photographing them. And that's kind of like what you're looking at today. So
you had an earlier step too, though, right?
Yeah,
because I saw work
it's been a
like 2
little
years
bit of a
ago
step.
in Dallas where it was like they were crumpled photographs, maybe on a neutral background,
Right.
with, like color gradation.
yeah, so there was a step before this that was a few years ago that I would photograph the photographic backdrop on a backdrop, and then I would take them into Photoshop and just like manipulate them and kind of do these like really like tongue-in-cheek, like really silly like Photoshop like things to them, you know. And I made them kind of like, they were kind of like glamour shots of these backdrops, and I thought it was so interesting. And I was like, these objects were meant to be photographed, but they were never meant to be the subject. And that's kind of like the driving force in continuing this. And then after that, I started photographing them and just cutting them out literally on this like kind of adhesive fabric and putting them in the wall. And that was what was at HCP last year. And I remember having a conversation with one of the curators, and she was like, well, like, what if someone wants to buy this? Do you just sell this? Like, it was kind of this unclear thing that she was like, is this how, like, is this, she was like, I don't, like, get it. And I was like, yeah, well, it's really important that they not be in a frame. I don't want them in a square. Like, to me, that was really important because I'm kind of, like, pushing this idea of, like, what a photograph is, because these, I think of as, like, sculptural objects. Because that was my initial draw to them, was like, oh, this objecthood of this like huge photograph. So then I discovered that I could actually create frames that like travel along the outer edge of the backdrops, and started making these frames on a CNC router. And that's kind of like where I am right now. A lot of the colors that you're seeing, I'm photographing them in like a lighting studio with gels. So you might, it's kind of a common thing that you would photograph like celebrity. I always notice when celebrities are shot with gels. It's kind of this like technique that is kind of makes something a little bit more flashy than just a standard photograph. The smaller pieces, I'm not photographing with gels, but I'm creating these kind of like objects that are created with a negative space when I'm cutting them out on the CNC. So the photograph inside of these frames are dictated by the frame. So these, the image comes first, and then the frame, and then these, the frame comes first, and then the image. It's kind of an interesting methodology.
How do you make the frame?
I glue up panels of wood and put them on a CNC router, and then I create these, essentially these lines on a computer that the router will follow and cut out the piece, and then I spend months sanding them.
They're really beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really been a process for me to start kind of feeling like I have more of a hand in the creative process. So I feel like a photographer sometimes can feel a little left out in terms of like painters who are painting and sculptors who are sculpting. So that's kind of been my way of like delving into the sculptural realm a little bit.
So like plays with objects, like photos as objects, but then also like the landscape. I mean, it's like a big part of photography, I guess.
Absolutely, like one of the most, I mean, from the 1800s, the very first thing people wanted to photograph was the Western landscape, and that's like kind of what I'm pulling from a lot. And a lot of these photographs, like that one over there, a lot of these mountains, they're like these majestic scenes that we've all seen before because there are screensavers, they're on our calendars, we have puzzles of them, we have them framed in our houses, and they've kind of become oversaturated in like society, and especially with the digital revolution, that these images kind of like have lost their pizzazz, lost their
novelty.
Yeah, right. It's kind of novelty is a really good word. That it's like how many people a picture of a sunset's a picture of a sunset's a picture of a sunset. You know.
Yeah, but these are all background things, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's interesting that.
What a good collection.
Yeah. Yeah, I have quite a collection of backdrops.
That's awesome. And were they all folded like that, or did you do that for the effect?
These I ordered like from Amazon, and they would be folded like this, and I took them immediately out and immediately photographed them because I didn't want the wrinkles to go.
Right.
And then I would start kind of creating them. I started further destroying that grid, and then trying to create these like folds. And what I find so interesting about it is I really love to like kind of like travel, like you kind of forget that you're looking at a photograph of a photograph, and then your eye begins to like travel in and out of what you know is the photograph and the photograph itself.
That's awesome. Does anyone have any questions for Kalee?
I'm interested in these ones that have a cutout from the image and then a frame within the
Yeah, so
final.
that kind of goes along with the methodology that I was talking about, in that the frames came first and then a photograph behind them. So essentially my process was photographing the frame, bringing it into Photoshop, and just kind of like moving this around.
Okay.
And as I did that, I found the composition I liked, and I kind of left it there, and I was like, wait a minute, I really love, and then I would erase. I used the actual like erase tool to like.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
And,
like,
and then
It does have
I saw like the image, and I was like, I like that image as like the final piece, as opposed to like the actual like cropped version.
And then the little inset piece of the photograph that's within the frame is still lined up with the placement of the original photo, right?
Right.
Okay. hanging just so.
Right, exactly, yeah. We had a little bit of like rehanging.
Yeah, Kalee came in yesterday too, but everything was great. Thank you, Brian. Brian Garcia did a lot of work this week. We flip our shows in a week, but he had this, and then it was like fun coming in, and it was like, oh wait, yeah, like that.
Right, just like,
And the mountain would be there. Like,
Right.
so
Yeah.
it's sort of really fun to see. It's great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kalee. She'll be here as well.